And we're happy to welcome back former North Country Congressman Bill Owens, who is now a cross-border trade consultant and commentator for WAMC Northeast Public Radio. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you, Tom.
Lots happening in the world of politics. Here in the U.S. and Canada with a big federal election next week. Let's start with the impeachment investigation. Based on the evidence we've seen so far, are there grounds to impeach the president?
There's probable cause, as you would say in the legal setting, to investigate. There's absolutely no doubt about that. The key piece here of evidence is going to be the actual recording of the calls, which have been moved to a separate server. And this brings us back to the Nixon tapes. I think that's where the battle actually gets fought to determine what the outcome is. My suspicions, although clearly I don't know, is that there's much more damning evidence on the actual calls than we've seen so far, because I'm sure that those transcripts were heavily redacted.
Polls over the last week show a slim majority of Americans now supporting impeachment. Should Democrats move full speed ahead with this?
I think that they should. Given what we know, we're now hearing the various members of the State Department testifying before Congress, shedding some very interesting facts on the record that I don't think are helpful to the president. It's very clear, in my mind at least, that he at least made an attempt to make a deal with the Ukrainian president. Whether he was successful or not, we don't know, but it's pretty clear that that happened, and therefore it's appropriate to be investigated.
Why all the back and forth over having a formal vote to start the impeachment inquiry?
I think one is precedent. Most other cases, the two during our lifetime, were begun with formal impeachment resolutions. I think the reason the Speaker is not doing it is A, Congress sets the rules. There are no rules cast in stone about how this happens. Congress determines what's a high crime and misdemeanor. So Congress has complete control of this process. I don't think the Speaker wants to put those members of Congress who are in swing districts in a position where they have to take that vote. And since she doesn't really need it, and as a practical matter, if they gather enough evidence, they could vote an impeachment inquiry today and hold a vote to impeach tomorrow.
Are Republicans pushing for this because a number of Democrats are on the fence about this?
I think that's part of it, but more importantly, it gives power to the Republicans, or to whoever the minority party is, to issue subpoenas and to call witnesses. Right now, they don't have that ability because it's all within the committee structure.
Should they have that right?
That's a good question, and I would suggest to you that in a different environment where you had a different person as president, I think that you might get a different reaction. But given the obstinate positions, the name calling, the denigration of members of the Democratic Party, I think that that's weighing against the president in this situation.
Are there a number of Democrats, even here in New York State, Anthony Brindisi, for example, in the 22nd district? Are there a number that are in districts where Trump clearly won in 2016 and is popular and maybe leaning against supporting the impeachment?
I'm sure that there are any number of people who are making that political calculus. And certainly Brindisi may be the obvious example in our region. And they're going to have to continue to do that because they only need 219 votes to move this along. And we all know where it's likely to go in the Senate. But again, I'd go back to this idea that if we get to the Nixon situation where the Supreme Court upheld Congress getting the tapes, that you could be in the same position relative to these phone calls. If we go back and we actually get the recording, and the recording is damning, then I think the game changes completely, and I think you see lots of people move into the we need to impeach him category, maybe even Republicans in the Senate. If that doesn't happen, or the recording is not particularly problematic, then I think there's real risk to the Democrats.
With Joe Biden's son's business dealings in Ukraine and China coming under scrutiny, does that hurt him potentially?
I think it does. However, again, as Biden has repeated, and I think almost every media outlet except Fox News has repeated, there is no evidence that he did anything wrong.
A number of Republicans are calling for a Justice Department investigation into both of them.
Correct, and that's not unreasonable to do, and is appropriate. Again, though, there are no actual allegations against Hunter Biden.
So for Joe Biden, how has he responded to all this? Has it hurt him in the Democratic race for president?
Looking at polling, doesn't seem to have affected him. The Hunter question doesn't seem to have impacted. He's been more simply overtaken by Elizabeth Warren than I think he's been hurt by these allegations.
And is that what we've seen in the past few weeks?
I think that that's what we're seeing. And some of the deeper polling questions would lead you to conclude that.
So how did they do this past week? On Tuesday night, they debated, all of them on the stage together for the first time. Who came out ahead? Who scored the points?
I don't think the picture changed very much. Bernie making an appearance, I think was beneficial to him. He looked pretty good. I don't think he made any points that were of great benefit to him. I thought Elizabeth Warren had been doing better in the debates than she did the other night, primarily because she seemed more aggressive, more professorial, and a little bit agitated. And I thought Joe, in contrast, seemed under control. He seemed to speak pretty well. I mean, you have to remember, Joe Biden is Joe Biden. And whether he's talking at his current age or 10 years ago, I'm not sure I see a whole lot of difference. This is just the man. But he connects with people. And that's a huge piece of this, that Biden connects with people. It's not as clear to me that Warren is doing that.
At this stage, is it a three-man race, a three-person race?
I think it is. Somebody else would have to jump in and do an exceptional job in some area. In other words, win the Iowa caucus, have a real spotlight moment in one of the debates. I don't think anybody had a spotlight moment last night. I think now maybe what we're engaging in is looking at the candidates and that sort of second tier of folks maybe trying to line up to be vice president and or for a cabinet position.
Canadians are heading to the polls next week. Is Justin Trudeau and the Liberals in danger of losing their majority in government?
I think they clearly are. If you look at the polls, they're running in that 33, 34% range for both Conservatives and the Liberals, which means it's unlikely anyone gets enough votes to get a majority, which means you're going to have a coalition government. NDP is next and the Green Party is fourth. So that tells me that likely a coalition government includes the Liberals and not the Conservatives.
Folks here in the U.S. have probably heard about the brownface, blackface scandal with Justin Trudeau. It's been in the pages of Time magazine, both in the U.S. and in Canada. Do you think that ended up hurting him?
I don't think that incident, based upon the polling in Canada, changed very much. They've stayed within this very narrow band of about 1% for weeks now. And that story broke, let's say, a month ago. Didn't seem to have much impact. I think Trudeau is being hit by the situation with the United States and USMCA, the constant turmoil with China, and the inability to resolve almost anything. And that gives you kind of a not good feel. People are saying, wait a minute, we're not getting anything done. Which is of curiosity to me, because if you look at what's happening in the US, we have the same situation. We have easy trade wars to win, except we can't resolve China, we can't resolve the USMCA. We've had difficulty with the EU. We've had difficulty with Southeast Asia. So where are we winning and why are we not getting things done? And I think that Trudeau is suffering from the same malaise.
In Canada, the new NAFTA deal, the new trade deal, made its way through Parliament, did not get final approval. And so neither the U.S. nor Canada have ratified it.
Correct.
Is that a big deal to Canadians?
Oh, I think they pay more attention than we do to the trade deal. It's more important to them. Their economy is much more export-based than our economy is. And I think that they believe that if the U.S. ratifies it, they will quickly ratify it.
Could Trump's decision to withdraw troops from Syria come back to haunt him?
It should come back to haunt him. I thought that that was one of the most disgraceful and cowardly things that I have seen an American president do. It's simply outrageous to abandon people who fought with you, who died with you, and now you suddenly decide that, well, there's some risk there, particularly in light of the fact that within the week he sent troops and armament to Saudi Arabia. So the conclusion you can reach is, if you have money and you have oil, you get our support, at least for now. The Kurds have no real assets other than their fighting ability to give to us, and I think the president has just simply thrown them away.
He did say, he's said for a long time, he was going to get the U.S. out of these wars. Was that primarily what drove this?
It's very difficult to analyze his actions because they appear to be ad hoc. He has a call with the Turkish president. Within hours, he says we're going to leave, Afghanistan and the Kurds, but with no real explanation. He then subsequently said, well, I said I was going to bring our troops out of Afghanistan and these wars in the Mideast, but he doesn't explain why it wasn't a gradual withdrawal, why we didn't take steps to protect the Kurds, why there wasn't a plan. It's just a completely irrational and ad hoc approach. And there's just a quote which I think sums this up incredibly. The president said, if Turkey, quote, does anything that I, in my great and unmatched wisdom, consider to be off limits, I will totally destroy and obliterate the economy of Turkey. Who would say such a thing? It makes no sense and makes us appear literally incompetent.